brother Youssef, and anything halal, haram, we'll add with that. Brother Youssef, please.
Assalamu alaikum. This is a topic I feel almost like I was born to live with. Anyone who's known me we're going to be getting into some of the evidences and some of the things tonight. No matter where I've turned in life, this topic has always been there for me. I've warned people about this since the mid to late 90s. I don't like to brag, but I have a lot of people, including Allah as a witness, that I outlined a lot of these events that we are witnessing today back in 1998, because I saw the trends and I saw the patterns and I saw the way society was going, and I knew it undoubtedly we would come to this point. Now, the only thing I was wrong on in terms of my predictions at that time as a teenager was how fast. I mean, it has gotten so fast that it's just no way, and even the last 5 years, it is accelerating at light speed. I want to start off with especially the kids, the young people, the sisters. This is a very controversial topic. It's not one that you are going to hear often in many masjids across the country, unfortunately. There's many reasons why, as the Sheikh mentioned. Some parts of Europe, I mean, you can go to jail for even having a khutbah, on what is in our holy books, what our Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even says is considered to be hate speech. But here in the United States, we still are blessed with freedom of speech, and we are allowed to talk about it. But I will be as clean, as moral, as Islamic in my manners, and my choice of words tonight. Everything will be cleaned up as much as it can, but the message will not. We will be outlining this from the beginnings. We will show the origins of this. We will show where it started in the last 100 years and how it is accelerating. We will name some of the individuals who are responsible for this. Because as you're going to see as I wrap this whole thing up, a lot of these people are not our enemies. A lot of these people are diseased of the mind, spirit. They are sick, and they can benefit from our help. There are so many stories in our history of sinners, idolaters, pagans, adulterers, becoming Muslim and becoming some of the best of people. My grievance is with the people who are promoting it, the people who are taking advantage of impressionable young children, and the people who are behind the machine of this LGBTQ, agenda. I feel that as Muslims, we can no longer kick the can down the road, as the expression in the United States goes, meaning you just kind of push it farther back, you give yourself some breathing room, it's still waiting on you. No matter how much you push it away, it's always going to come. And then eventually the wind is going to blow and blow the can right back at you. And it's on our doorstep now. They are here. I saw how they've infiltrated the Christian religion over the course of my life. We will talk about those steps, how they went from tolerance, how they went from we just want to be married to you love us or you go to jail in just a very, very short period of time. And now they have Islam in the crosshairs. And we're going to talk about some of the evidences there. If you're a mother or a father, unfortunately, and you're in the West, there is a good chance your first grader or your second grader or your third grader has already heard of these issues. If they have not gotten it from these indoctrination centers known as public schools, they've gotten it from the cartoons. Just the other day, my son was telling me, 10 years old, wanting to play innocent activities, there was a transgendered flag appearing in a famous, I'm not going to give it any free attention here, but a famous cartoon video game. You're trying to play to beat the bad guys, and all of a sudden your 10-year-old, Dad, what's that? What is that flag for? You're seeing the Disney Corporation. I could do a whole 3 hours worth of content just on Disney in the last 5 years alone, but we'll leave it at that for now. But Disney, with their shows aimed at kids. When I was growing up, Disney had the Seven Dwarfs and Snow White. Now they have the gender neutral, character. They have the gay couple, and you're seeing it there as well. You're seeing gender confusion across the United States. You have terms now that were unknown in the vocabulary 10, 15 years ago. Even to myself, when I talked about, I was always kind of on the pulse of this, such as gender fluid. He is a gender fluid person. meaning his gender changes hour to hour, day to day, activity to activity. Yes, this is the levels of the insanity. But there's something much more sinister, behind that. As I did a lecture a few weeks ago on Shaitan's biggest trick, and I talked about how he subtly gets us to idolize or worship human beings and tricks us into shirk without us realizing it. But agendas like this, the Shaitan doesn't bring it that often because it's very difficult. It takes a lot of time and effort, but it is the ultimate. And we're going to give evidence from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the Quran, stating that this is one of the most ultimate, of sins of betrayal. The Shaitan took a long time. This issue was dormant for a couple of thousand years, you can argue. There wasn't a widespread problem with this. Unlike issues of idolatry and shirk and people leaving God, which tend to occur minute by minute, hour by hour, decade by decade, this one took a long time to resurface, but it is here. Now, we are going to break down tonight's lecture in 3 stages. Is it haram? Yes or no? I'm going to show the evidences from the Quran, and I think we're going to leave in the first 10 seconds understanding whether the answer is yes or no. And we're going to get some other clarifications as well. We're going to talk about the evolution of this movement in the last 100 years, how it has come so fast from a figure in Germany in the early 1900s, all the way up to the sexual revolution, all the way up to the AIDS epidemic, supposed epidemic, we'll get into a little bit of that, and then all the way into the post-marriage years, which have happened post-2015. And then we're going to talk about, as always, the Islamic manners, how we are to deal with these people. Should this be a sister, a brother? I mean, literal sense, not figurative, as we all are brothers and sisters in Islam. If someone comes and visits the masjid and they express some of these feelings, how should we deal with them? And we're going to talk about that from the Islamic perspective as well. One of my first lectures I did here, I talked about cults. And I used the comparison between a cult and some of the accusations against our messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One of the signatures of a cult is they have their iconography, their own symbols that you identify with. They have their own flags. They have their own belief systems. And no one represents the cult more than the LGBT community. It is a religion. They have their own symbols. They now have their own month, courtesy of the United States government. The Canadian government, Justin Trudeau, that I'm not even going to say what is on my mind because we have women and children here, but Justin Trudeau said to give them all summer. They should have all summer to tribute to this lifestyle. So they have their own holidays. They have their own summer in some countries. Others, as we mentioned earlier, you are not allowed to criticize them. We are going to break down this cult, as I mentioned, in stages. Is it haram? Now, that would have been 100 years ago. I would have been laughed out of the masjid if I even would have asked that question. But now, where everybody is a sheikh, everybody has access to Google, everybody can have a blog, anyone can write for a magazine, we are seeing that's somehow becoming blurred now. Let's take a look at July 28th, 2015. According to one of the best sources for Sunnah knowledge, the New York Times, that's where you want to go to get an authentic ruling. The New York Times said, absolutely not. It is not haram. And what was the reason cited? The gentleman was an Arab, by the way. Mustafa Iqbal was the journalist for the New York Times. And he stated that the Quran is not clear of whether homosexuality is haram or halal. He said, in fact, that Allah punished these people of Lot because they went after the visitors. It had nothing to do with the homosexuality. I did a Google search the other day and I found, this was just because it was the New York Times, I chose to give a date and an author. But there are so many articles like this where we have the kuffar, we have some of these Muslim in name onlys who've been born in the West and they want to earn their stripes, if you will. So they go and they write for the magazines. And they say, oh, Islam says it's halal. It's a conditioning, process. I want to say to Mr. Mustafa, well, in Surah 54, verses 33 to 39, we find a little bit different of a picture. Let's explore it, shall we? The people of Lot denied the warning. Indeed, we set upon them stones except the family of Lot. We saved them before dawn. So we see a little bit going on here. They denied the warning. Well, what was the warning? We will get to that.
Except his wife.
Yes, except his wife, which of course, obviously she looked back and embraced it. As a favor from us, thus do we reward the grateful. And he had already warned them of our assault, but they disputed the warning and they demanded from him the guests. So we see right here in context, Lot's mission, his calling, was to warn the people. We're going to prove that even more detail here in a minute. They said, no, we want those guests right there. We want those 2 men that are with you. Despite the warnings, they did not heed the call. The people of Lot, we learn in Surah Ashura, as they pronounce it correct. Right? Always the Arabic. The people of Lot denied the messengers. When their brother Lot said to them, will you not fear Allah? Indeed, I am a trustworthy messenger, so fear Allah and obey me. So again, you have this. Do you approach males among the worlds and leave what your Lord has created for you for mates? But you are a transgressing people. They said, if you do not desist, O Lot, you will surely be of those evicted. So I want to say to Mr. Mustafa of the New York Times, what was Lot conveying to these people here? And what was their response? Was their response like, oh, Astaghfirullah, I'm sorry. We didn't realize what we were doing was wrong. No, we'll kick you out. We are not changing what we believe, what we are doing, and who we are. They went after the messenger, as most messengers in history, unfortunately, have been when they've been sent to their people. We find here again in Surah Al-Araf, and we sent Lot to his people. Do you commit such immorality as no one has preceded you with from among the worlds? The English translation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying right here, you people are unique. You have transgressed the bounds more than anyone in history. Again, to the New York Times, I think you didn't do a very good textual analysis of the Quran when you make such claims, and I'm sure he knows he's lying. And the thing is, he doesn't care if we know he's lying. All he has to do is reach the gullible who are going to read that, and they are all of a sudden going to say, okay, well, yeah, it's halal, Islam, great. I was born Muslim. This doesn't contradict my desires. I can do what I want to do. And of course, that's the intent here from Mr. Ayub. He knows that we know. He is trying to, again, reach the gullible. So I think, as always, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the final say, on this matter, whether it is halal or haram. Did you have anything you'd like to add on the halal?
Halal, of course, we know is haram 100%. In fact, something very important. When people text me a video, an imam, Algerian imam in Germany, Algerian imam, and he made couple women got married together and 2 men got married together. Please. And they covered their faces, but not him. I said, Sheikh Ibrahim, what do you think? I said, the ayat is decided. So, and also to add, this is Surah Al-Ankabut, that تخلو الرجال من دون النساء, a great sin. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed those people. In fact, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he went to the Sham for fighting, for Ghazwa, and we passed where the area with the Red Sea actually, and with the Qamulud, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, pass and do not even look. Pass this river and they do not look. Unfortunately now, in Jordan, between Jordan and occupied land, Palestine, and they call the Jews, they make an area only for those. They come to this area, and not even not Muslim country, Jordan, Muslim country, but they come completely naked 100%. Men and women, actually, you can, of course, I didn't see that, but I heard about people visit that area and they told me that. But of course, we know very well it's haram, and even Christian and Jews, they're haram. Christian and Jews, actually, as I told you, my second language is Hebrew. In the Torah, it's haram, great haram. even in the Jewish level. But I mean, the Bible actually, our new Muslims here would say that.
Oh, shukran. Very good further analysis there. Going to the nikah thing, I saw this. My nephew, who's watching me tonight, Salam Amora, he sent me a video a couple of weeks back, and I had to say it's the worst recitation of Fatiha I ever heard in my life. It was a supposed imam conducting a marriage ceremony for two men, reciting Fatiha while he was doing it. I said the worst recitation I've probably heard of Fatiha in my life. And you're having these so-called imams, we'll get to some of them later, who are condoning this, who are rolling over for this, who are saying words that I heard in the 1980s to the Christian church: coexistence, get along, acceptance, mutual tolerance. And we're going to get back.
Hold on. Please give me attention. Very important. Online, listen to this. Impossible. Impossible and impossible. An imam with knowledge. Imam with knowledge, Quran and Sunnah will accept this kind of fact. There is no way, Hussein. Impossible. They call Imam, but he's not an Imam. By the way, Imam, is not leading the Salah. Anybody can lead the Salah. Kids, Sunday, I make the kids leading the Salah. That's Imam. But the Imam here, with knowledge, winning knowledge here, understand the Quran very well and under the Sunnah of Rasulullah. That is the knowledge. You know, me by myself, I'm Arab, but I cannot make fatwas, halal, haram. But I go to the resources of to give the answer for people. But for those people, it's absolutely not scholars, not just leading the Salah, and they are not in those. Sorry for that. Continue.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you see the so-called imam we have in Washington, D.C. He wears the rainbow scarf. He's dressed like you or I, and he's got his own masjid. And it's an LGBTQIA. You can Google him in Washington, D.C.
In America?
Yeah.
Oh.
He is a LGBTQ imam. They call him the first openly gay imam in the United States. And as the Sheikh said, no one with knowledge, would obviously take such a position, but we are living in the twilight zone, so everything is backwards, and they're trying to get everyone to think backwards. So how did we get here? You're seeing open magazines like the New York Times blatantly lie, as I talked about in the opening, all things that we are going to see. Well, you can trace some of the modern transgender and homosexual movement back to Germany and a gentleman by the name of Magnus Hirschfeld. Magnus Hirschfeld was one of the first time I ever heard the word sexologist used to describe a doctor. Hirschfeld was the be-all, end-all of the homosexual movement, an open homosexual himself. He was one where we get the idea that there was a gay gene in the human being. This opened up the door for religious institutions to be hammered with the point, well, God made him this way, so how would God judge him? This laid the framework for that argument, was that this Magnus Hirschfeld said there is a gay gene, that some men are born physically, I'm a man, but inside, I'm really a woman. And it paved the way again for who are you to judge? God would not judge you. You often hear, if you approach some of these people, they'll say, who are you? Only God can judge me. God made me this way. If God didn't want me to be this way, he would not have allowed me to be born this way. And it has opened the door for that type of, dialogue, from Mr. Magnus Hirschfeld. He also had quite the resume. He was one of the first, his clinic, to conduct male to female surgery for transgenders, where they would convert through operation the male anatomy to the female. The embodiment of Magnus Hirschfeld's work in Germany was to overturn what they called paragraph 175. This was the German law that stated that homosexuality was a mental disorder and was against the law. Hirschfeld and his group sought out to overturn that. Now, in his life, he never got to witness the fruition of his labor. It would come much later to where Germany now is, as the Sheikh mentioned in the opening, you can't even criticize this movement without being locked up or threat of imprisonment. But at the time, it was quite different. And we hear in the West, all those Nazis, they burned the books. Well, you go and you look when they had the Nights of Broken Glass, where they went through these bookstores and they broke open the shops and they burned books. a lot of the books they were burning were Magnus Hirschfeld books. They were burning this LGBTQ transgender propaganda back in 1933. They were way ahead of their time because they were receiving it first. Long before it would come to America 40 years later, they were dealing with it at the time. So you flash forward, 1952 in the United States, see, we were a little bit behind, was the first ever male to female surgery. And the connection between Hirschfeld and the gentleman who did this, the same ethnic group, that's needless to say, which ethnic group that was, that conducted those. And also when you look at all these transgender clinics, when you look at all the people in media who are promoting it, you will always see the same ethnic group 90% of the time. Of course, the Jews. They are the ones overwhelmingly with their fingerprints and signature all over this transgendered movement. So in 1970s, late 60s, early 70s, the American culture changed dramatically. You had the Vietnam War. You had the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Pre-1960, everything in America was status quo. They would have television shows with a husband and wife. Were always married, of course. They never even showed them because of shame and morals and shyness. They would never show on American television pre-1960 a married couple even in the same bed. They would show on the television shows two separate beds. That was the type of modesty that existed in the United States at that time. I grew up watching these shows with my grandmother when I was a boy, so I had seen kind of an alternative to what I was being fed in conventional media. But in the middle to late 1960s, with the really advent of rock music being promoted more and more to the masses, which a lot of those rock groups from the 60s have been exposed as military assets, CIA agents, and they were producing this sex, drugs, and rock and roll culture, everything in America started to change. There was a key figure in the anti-Vietnam protests. His name was Allen Ginsberg, also from the same ethnic group that I mentioned earlier. Mr. Ginsberg was responsible for the foundation of NAMBLA. If anyone has ever heard of NAMBLA, it stands for the North American Man-Boy Love Association. So you started to see more and more of this stuff on the fringes of society. Still not mainstream like it's become today, but you're seeing the push. Then they were able to deliver a major blow. 1973. It was an event that didn't get mentioned in the media. It's an event that rarely gets talked about in the history of this country, but something very monumental happened in 1973. The American Book of Psychiatric Disorders had homosexuality listed into it. And if someone had came to a family member or a doctor and they complained of having these desires, they would be given therapy, testosterone therapy, talking, whatever type of, encouragements, positive reinforcements, dietary changes. Those type of things would be there to motivate the person to change, to go back to being normal, so to speak. But after 1973, the gay lobby, with the usual suspects I've mentioned multiple times before already, were able to get this removed from the Book of Psychiatric Disorders. That was their major step for everything we are seeing today, because what they were able to do is say no longer, again, it's a mental illness. No, going back to Hirschfeld, you were born this way. And from that moment forward, in the schools, in the media, you were never allowed to teach this issue as anything but they were born this way. This is something from God. Who are we to question it? And then came the era of tolerance. Everyone took the stance in America, okay, we accept you. This is what you want to do. We don't have any problem with that. Just do your thing and don't bother us. And it stayed that way for a little bit. And then the American public, in their naivety, were not really too familiar with exactly who these people are. What are they doing? Because they were selling to me when I was a child. They loved each other. It was about marriage. They just happened to love a man instead of loving a woman. It was about building a family. These were all the things we were taught when we were growing up. Well, something started to happen in 1983. In LA, in San Francisco, the clinics started being overwhelmed. What was going on? There were men with massive disease. They were dying of things that normal people with normal immune systems don't die of. And it was massive, widespread. Panic came in the streets. What's going on here? There was a doctor, and I cannot remember his name off the top of my head. It can be Googled online. He came out and he said, this is GRIDS, gay-related immunodeficiency. This is immune deficiency caused by the homosexual lifestyle. The homosexual lifestyle is causing disease. But of course, that message could not reach the general public. So they called it AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. They didn't go with the original name for it because AIDS was not affecting. Only people in places like you found in the third world with poor sanitary conditions, poor drinking water, poor, all that type of stuff, you were finding people with AIDS. But in the civilized world outside the homosexual community, you were not finding it at all, except for in hemophiliacs due to the frequency of blood transfusion. Well, in order for them to prove this was a supposedly sexually transmitted disease, they told the story on American television of a gentleman who went by the name of Gaëtan Dugas, a French-Canadian airline steward. He became known as Patient Zero. And when they unveiled this gentleman's lifestyle, the American public was in horror. This man was 31 years old when he died, numerous diseases. He had professed, by his own admission, having between 1,500 and 2,000 partners in a period of less than 10 years. He just wanted to get married, as the media said. And the American public started thinking, wait a minute here, what is going on? How widespread is this? You lied to us. And there was a backlash that set this agenda back quite far. It pushed them back about a decade because they had to rebuild the image again because the American public was seeing that all the feel-good stuff you were saying was just simply not true. These people had no intention of building a family. They had no intention. It was nothing about love. It was pursuing your desires to the point of death. Statistics that were unveiled back then still stand today. The average homosexual man lives 20 years less than the straight counterpart. 20 years. Major life shorten. Your life expectancy goes way down. We talk about depression, drug use, dependency. They will blame us. They'll say it's because we didn't accept them. There's no time in human history they've been more accepted than now. We really haven't seen that number move, too much. Now, in the 90s, you saw the second part of the agenda. They started putting them in your living room through that television box that we gladly welcome them into our living room. I'm talking about the homosexual community, but the controllers, the establishment, have a window now into everyone's home. Now they have it into your pocket, as I talked about a few weeks ago with the mobile phone. And they started showing more and more openly gay characters. There was a show called Will and Grace, famously. Movies started being produced where you started seeing openly gay characters. I remember reality television was just enthralled with them. And the message was now not the tolerance anymore. See, tolerance was the 80s. You have to tolerate it. Now the message was just let them get married, that's it. They just want to get married, let it happen, and it'll go away. And I remember telling my friends, oh no, this is only the start. They don't want to get married. We just talked about the gentleman with over 2,000 partners or close to 2,000 partners in 10 years. It was never about marriage for him. The vast majority was not. But it was about a victory. It was about defining the institution of marriage, which the pressure at the time, they still were not ready. And in 1996, the Defense of Marriage Act was signed, where you found basically Bill Clinton at the time was a liberal. Now you'll never see a liberal doing this. He said marriage should be respected only between a man and a woman. And the American public went back to sleep. It's over. It's defined now. There's no way they can push this again. How were they wrong? It would grow and grow and grow. And you saw basically just within a matter of a few years, 8 years after Bill Clinton signed that into law, you had Massachusetts going rogue and saying, we're going to have a same-sex marriage. And they did. You had Gavin Newsom. Now he's the, unfortunate for the people of California, he is the governor of California. A long time ago, this gentleman was the mayor of San Francisco. And he thumbed his nose at the federal government as well and was conducting these marriages in San Francisco. They were going on all over the country. The war was being won. The people of California, and we have this image, in a large part justified, that California is a bit crazy. Some liberal, policies don't make a lot of sense out there when you really observe them, some of the things they've done. But anytime the people of California have been asked to vote on this issue, they've always said no. And in 2008, they voted on a proposition to do this, to stop this. The people have that right. But the United States courts told them, no, you don't. And they overturned the proposition, and it was back to business as usual. And then we had the most pro-LGBTQ president in modern history, took the White House in 2008, unfortunately, Barack Obama. And his first few years, he really didn't touch this issue. But as he was what they call your second term lame duck president, you're not coming back, he unveiled it all. And he started talking about this issue with more and more frequency. It started becoming one of his major talking points. And it became a major talking point for the Democratic Party, that they were the party of the LGBTQ. And 2015, the final nail in the marriage battle was won when the United States Supreme Court, they said, okay, it's on. Freedom of liberty, under the Constitution, they have those same protections. And same-sex marriage became the law of the land. And it's been here ever since. Now, as I told you where this is going, tolerance, just let us get married. Would that be enough? No. We have seen since 2015 the biggest escalation of this agenda that's ever been seen in the history of the world. This has gone, no one prior, if you ask an average teenager in 2015, what was a trans? They tell you a transformer, cartoon, robot, they would have no idea what you were talking about. You go and you mention that word today, every single young person, probably from the age of 6, is going to know exactly what you mean. And this all started because, again, they had that agenda mission accomplished. Now I call the next phase of the plan, you won't not only tolerate it, you're going to let us get married, but you're going to be made to love it. And that's where we are at right now. And if you don't love it, we have a place for you with a lock and key and bars. After we call you names, of course, we'll try that technique. We'll try to take your job. We will try to say you're a religious fanatic. We will try to say that you are a threat to public order. And then, after that, if that don't work, we are going to lock you up. I mean, it's nothing short than putting a gun to your head and saying that you have to accept this lifestyle. So where did the trans thing come from? Because I grew up in the 80s. I've chronicled those experiences. I never heard of trans either back then, because the agenda was not getting enough attraction. Again, as I've highlighted, every time they had a vote, the people always overwhelmingly rejected. Not enough men were openly becoming homosexual and participating in this. So they launched the next phase of the plan. I call it Operation Trickery. This is where you had a whole generation of homosexual men becoming women to attract men. I've seen the comments on Twitter. I've seen them on social media. Young boys saying, well, I would never be with a man, but a transgendered is not bad. And then there was one, and this was the best. I shared this with my coworkers. It was a doctor, psychology. He said, if you were a heterosexual man and you would not consider marrying or dating a transgender, guess what? You're gay. You are the one who's gay. They have them in beauty pageants. Now, Miss World, I guarantee you can mark this, copyright my statement. Miss World will probably, or Universe they call, whatever they call it these days, these pageants, will be won by a trans woman. They just had Miss Holland, I believe was, I saw this in the article the other day, was also won by a trans woman. You cannot escape this. If you don't want to date them, you're gay. You're a bigot. You're hateful. And again, this is, I call it Operation Trickery, because it's about trying to play with your eyes. This looks like a woman. It talks like a woman, because they've given it hormones for 10 years. They've had surgeries. They've done everything, tens of thousands of dollars. One they had on YouTube was about $100,000 spent on filing down the jaw, angling the face, carving the cheekbones, taking estrogen for 10 years. And when you look at the finished product, it's hard to even differentiate between a man and a woman anymore at this point. And this is becoming such a common thing. My friend was telling me he was in downtown of the city I grew up in, and he was doing some kind of art exhibit, helping. He's not the artist. He was helping a person, he's a friend of his who's an artist. And they had one of their rallies, downtown. And he said the majority of them are trans. Where did all the normal gay men go? I said they're still there. They just learned a better trick. They just now dress like women. And they're selling this agenda. And it's more and more. You have in our schools now what they call drag queen story hour. I don't know if anyone here has heard of this. It's mostly going on in big liberal cities like New York and San Francisco and Los Angeles. But they will take kids, 7, 8 years old, and they will have them have a drag queen comes to the classroom and reads them a story. They are having these events being sponsored by the schools. In Texas, there was one such of these events. We used to have field trips where we went to the aquarium. We learned about biology. Now they're having a field trip where they're taking you to a gay bar in some of these areas as well. And they are letting the children 7, 8, 9, 10 years old watch this stuff. I mean, it's unbelievable that we have gotten and allowed ourselves to get to this point. There has been good news. There was a Muslim city council up in a suburb of Dearborn, Michigan. They got together, it's about a month ago, and they signed legislation removing that flag because that flag was flying in public buildings. And the Muslim community there said, not on our watch. And they voted unanimously to take it down and replace it with the American flag. You did see there is a Christian boycott of Target going on right now for what they tried to do, which was they had a whole huge merchandise section dedicated to LGBTQ. Shirts that said things I will not repeat here because there are children, but graphic things. And Target is under boycott as well. I refuse to shop there. I recommend all Muslims, if you ever go to Target, please don't. You are just giving your money to haram causes. I mean, you're basically spending money on the haram causes, obvious as they are. Of course, you have what we have with Bud Light. Now, inshallah, we ain't going to have any Muslims have a problem drinking Bud Light, but, there's a huge backlash now against Anheuser-Busch because they were going to put a transsexual on the cover, of the can. And they are taking a huge, so you are seeing some fight back. But my biggest fear is what they are going to do is what they do best. They are going to stage some kind of attack in this country using an agent and blame it on us, blame it on a Christian group. And they're going to say, look what the hate online did. And they are going to pass those same hate speech laws that we see throughout Europe. Like you were saying, you cannot criticize them in large sections of the EU. You have no free speech. You are not allowed to disagree or anything. So that goes us to the last phase of this. We are going to talk about what we should do, how we should handle this situation and these people.
Before that, actually, I was, as you know, I was in Mexico last week. So I arrived to Texas. Stop this, please. This stop. When I went to Texas, make wudu to pray Dhuhr and Asr in that time. And I just make wudu. I say Bismillah. And somebody, when I make wudu, somebody, are you a Muslim? I look, I swear, I thought a lady spoke with me. A lady, actually, not I thought. She's a lady. Hair, eyes, this beautiful woman. And I said, yeah, I was shocked. I looked for wudu completely. And when I leave, I don't want to say anything because I don't know if she's a male or female, honestly. I said, I have a question for you. Say, outside the bathroom, outside. And she found me outside. Honestly, I ran away. I don't but to speak with her or honestly, I don't know, is male or female. But we are in the bathroom, male bathroom in Texas. And there's a musalla there. I make actually Dhuhr and Asr, my wife and my son, to pray over there. The moment I finish, I run away from the bathroom. Why? Because I heard, if I say anything about them, I'll be in prison. Especially me as an imam. Oh, especially also, yes, I'm very American, but I'm Palestinian too. Become a crime. So, sorry.
Oh, no worries.
We need a solution for this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I want to first, after we talked about the origins and some of the behaviors, and again, that's all.
Actually, 10 o'clock, Salat al-Isha.
15 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, inshallah. Yeah. To hate them. And the answer, like I said, is absolutely not. In fact, 82% of trans people, I pulled up a study before today because I knew the number was high. 82% have contemplated suicide in the last week. You have 40% of them have actually attempted it. We are dealing with people here who mentally, like that psychiatric book of disorders had said, back in 1973, they need our help. If we have a family member, if we have someone comes in the masjid and they say they're having these issues, they're having these thoughts, do we start yelling at them and treating them harshly? Absolutely not. We listen to them and we give them our heart and we provide honest counseling and we can save souls. I'll give you a story. This made me cry. And, sometimes people say, that du'as are never accepted, but I'll tell you one time it was. Let's go back to 2019. I'm in my office about Dhuhr prayer time. I'm reading on my lunch a custody battle between a crazed mother and the father over a young boy who was as old as basically my son, who's sitting here now as a 10-year-old, was at the time. And the mother was one of these liberals who wanted to use her children as props to show how progressive she was. And she was forcing the young boy to wear a dress. She was forcing the young boy to wear makeup at this age. And the father said, when he comes to me, he's crying. He's saying, Dad, I don't want to do that. I want to play baseball. I want to do these things. And the father was going to the courts. And they were siding with the mother, as often the American judicial system is designed to do. And they were going to give her back and take, because they said he was a transphobe. They were going to take the boy, away from the father for good. And the woman was about to put him on hormonal replacement therapy, which means that this boy would never have the ability in his life to have his own child. Yeah. And this decision, he's not even old enough to get past writing his name. And this demonic woman has basically already, done this, to him. And I wept because I had 3 boys of my own. At the time, I only had 2. And I just imagine the innocence I saw every day. And I made dua after a salah, said, let this, shaitan, lose this battle, so to speak, and let's get this boy saved. And 2 months later, I found out what the boy was. Father got himself some good lawyers and basically was able to get the boy away from that woman because she would have taken him down a path that there's no return. And so many times we're seeing this in the modern day society. We are seeing these parents, oh, look, I've got a trans child. You see it with this Angelina Jolie, this celebrity. You see it with Charlize Theron. The NBA basketball player, Dwayne Wade, has taken his first son, turned him into a trans, which turns out trans. The famous...
Legally can do that?
Well, they agree. I mean, the son was already a little bit older in Dwayne Wade's case. But now in California, all you have to do is get a good psychologist to go and pressure the kid. You feel like a girl, don't you? You feel like a girl, don't? And they can do it. It's the parents' wishes. Oh my God. It's becoming just, things you would never be able to believe, And the NBA basketball player I grew up watching, Magic Johnson, a very famous player in the 1980s. His oldest son is now trans. And the media, of course, is running with this. You're finding so many of these celebrities just by coincidence, are having trans kids. I believe there's no coincidence, obviously. That's why I made the gesture. But again, growing and growing. California's already, again, passed this legislation. We as Muslims have to be that friendly voice, that voice of reason that talks to them, that listens to them, that shows them there's another way. You know, this lifestyle they're pushing at you, what's going to do 20 years younger life expectancy, as I highlighted earlier. You are angering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are basically doing irreversible damage, you know, to your body. You are going to live a life of unfulfillment, disease. You know, you were created for a purpose. And anytime, as I highlighted in the lecture a couple weeks ago, we go against what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us for, you are going to have disunion, chaos, misery, you know, in the human being. So most of these people, they need our help. And I don't want to in any way encourage hostility. Now, we should be hostile to the movement when it's confronted to our children. When it's presented to us, we should openly reject it. But the individuals, some of them, are good people. They're just misguided. Now, so there's a lot of them, there's probably, you know, God knows best, no hope, you know, are so just caught up, you know, in this lifestyle that really saving them, there's no way. I hope tonight I was able to be as informative as possible. I hope a lot of people took something away from this, because I feel this issue is just, I can do several more on this as events come down, that we just keep kicking the can down the road, as I said earlier. And they're knocking now. I mentioned the gay imams. I mentioned what they're writing in the New York Times. There was a film wrote in Europe called A Jihad for Love. And a clever, whoa. It's called A Jihad for Love, and it followed Muslim gays during the month of Ramadan who were trying to get married in Europe. It's just becoming to the point of pure insanity. So yeah, I wish we'll close, you know, there. Always, again, maintain our Islamic manners, maintain our sense of, you know, who we are, what we want to be, and the way we treat others.
Okay, Brother Youssef, it's something very important. In fact, one of the conferences actually was the youth conference. I don't want to mention the organization. They invited me, Brother George was an imam in Florida. And then after Maghrib, you know, I came actually late, actually. So all my lecture continuously. In night time, after we finished, a couple came to me, 2 men, young guys actually, came to me, say, Sheikh Ibrahim, I want to speak with you privately. No problem. And I never imagined actually, this actually I'm talking about before my sickness. I got sick actually with my liver transplant 2016, before 2016. I mean, this carried a long time. I was alone with them. I said, by the way, I was shocked actually. The name Ahmad and Muhammad. They want to get married. I didn't say, excuse me, by the way. The most, as Brother Youssef said, I listened to them. Say, oh, we want to get married, but our father, our family, you know, refused, actually not accepting this fact. In fact, the only thing I was listening to them, Muhammad first, and then Ahmed after. I listen. After I finished completely, it takes a while. To be honest with you, I was shocked. But in the same time, I don't know, I want to speak, to discourage him to speak with me. Discourage. The key with this kind of matter, as Brother Youssef, listen, give attention. Definitely, those kids actually, after that, Allah, my witness, they are from Canada, but they came here for the conference. And now, alhamdulillah, both of them were more of them completely cured. They have done disease. In fact, I found from their talk that the reason is their parents. Too much, too pressure. You know, Quran, do this. A lot of parents doing that. Especially in America or Canada. I know some people in Canada, you listen to us. We have to understand the mentality of the kids. As I mentioned that week, Ali radiallahu anhu, we love Ali, right? Ali said this very important statement. May Allah give rahmah to my father. My father tell me this statement. Say, خاطبوا الناس على قدر عقولهم. Speak to the people according to their mentality, their thinking. That those kids, the 2 kids, Muhammad and Ahmed, they want to listen. Allah is my witness. I sit with them all after midnight, all Fajr. more than 2 hours just listen to it. And I felt both of them don't want to speak. I asked the question, do you have a relationship? No, but I want to get married first. Then after I listened completely, I didn't speak halal and haram. It's not my job because they know very well we are actually Islamic conference became one. Islamic conference. But I start to speak about their thinking, their future, something they love, I start to speak with them. And we didn't speak about marriage at all. And after that, I give them my number, of course. When they went to Canada, I visited Canada actually myself. I will sit with them. Alhamdulillah, now we're in touch, by the way. They are completely cured from that disease. As brother Youssef said, it is disease. It is disease psychology. Those kids, actually, they're Muslims. In our community, few of them here also. They came to my office. But honestly, the best way, in my opinion, brother Youssef or if we listen, understand their problem, maybe we can solve it. Sunnahfollowers, anything you want to ask question? Sunnahfollowers, Sister Laila? I think they are not there, Sunnahfollowers. They are there?
We have 20 people there.
Assalamu alaikum. I can check if there is any questions on YouTube.
All right, inshallah. Okay, jazakumullah.
Yes, we have one question. One question. I had to switch.
Have visa. You can eat, inshallah, the rest of the
Can you hear me?
After 20 minutes, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Subhanallah. How could he not hear me? I had one question. This ain't gonna work. Me doing this camera, I can't switch to the mic. Sister, we'll deal with your question next time, okay? I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry, sister. I tried to get to the mic switched over, but I couldn't get it switched over in time. Okay. SubhanAllah, I just couldn't get it switched over.